I know this is the most overused vlog music in existence, but I recently canceled my Epidemic Sound membership because I realized how dumb it was for me to pay $15 a month for royalty-free music when I'm not even making any money off of this channel. Anyways, this is just some footage I took back in March after I had gone back home for spring break, and Purdue decided that students would not be returning to campus afterwards. Of course, with quarantine and everything going on, all of the climbing gyms in Indiana shut down, and I soon realized that they would not be reopening for quite some time. So me being me, I immediately decided that I would be building a home wall for myself lest I go insane until the gyms reopen. And it couldn't just be any old woody, it had to be a moonboard. I first started climbing on this amazing training tool at the gym closest to my house last summer when I was back at home, and very soon after I started spending the majority of my time at the gym on it. One, because it was really fun for me and amazing for building strength, and two, it was quite frankly a lot better than any of the setting in my gym. This video is intended to be somewhat of a rough guide on how you can build one yourself, but I unfortunately got lazy with recording everything, and there are some steps that are missing some footage. It should be decent enough if you're competent with power tools, but please keep in mind that I just got my degree in electrical engineering, not civil engineering, so I am not responsible for anything that might happen if you follow my steps exactly. There are definitely some things in this video that I do that you should not do, and I'll point them out to you when we get there. Right now, I'm building the kickboard for the wall itself, which is a small vertical section of wall at the base so that there's room to use the bottom portion of the board for your feet, which is basically essential on any woody that's steeper than 30 degrees or so. The moonboard, if you didn't know, is built at a 40-degree angle, so the kickboard is definitely necessary to not repeatedly dab on the ground near the bottom of problems. You'll notice that I'm framing the kickboard with 6 vertical studs on some slightly uneven spacing between each stud. For those of you who don't know anything about how houses are constructed, typically the walls of a house are built on 16-inch centers, meaning that the distance from the center of one stud to an adjacent stud is usually 16 inches, while the floors and ceilings are usually built on 24-inch centers. Obviously, the closer the studs are to each other, the more studs there are, making the wall sturdier. However, with a climbing wall, you have to take into account the T-nuts that will be installed onto the front panel of plywood, since they can be spaced and patterned however you wish. For the moonboard specifically, the T-nuts are spaced on a 20cm square grid, which complicates things if you decide to frame your wall with 16-inch centers, since this would result in some of the studs overlapping the back of the T-nuts, preventing you from attaching holds to them. In all honesty, I probably should have just gone with 24-inch centers and called it a day, instead of this weird 6-stud configuration that I built, but at the time I had read some Reddit and Mountain Project threads that stated that their boards built on 24-inch centers were a little shaky at times, so I decided to add one more stud for stability, and the board is definitely very stable. I never feel anything shake or creak while climbing on it, so I guess it was worth it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that regardless of what spacing you choose to frame your wall with, make sure that your T-nut grid doesn't overlap with it. On another note, please do not follow the build instructions that are provided on the Moonboard website itself for how they built their board. They, for better or for worse, recommend framing your board on 32-inch centers, which is absolutely ridiculous for how heavy this thing is when all the holds are on it. Not only that, they also state to construct the wall out of 2x4s instead of 2x6s, which further exacerbates the stability issues presented by the sparse stud spacing. Now, I've read online that the LED kit for the Moonboard, should you choose to buy it, only has enough cabling between each LED to wrap around the width of a 2x4 and not a 2x6. So if you choose to buy the LED kit, either build your wall on modified 16-inch centers, or just use 2x6s and cut a few slots into them on the back for the LEDs to thread through. I built my wall with 2x6s and did not buy the LED kit because I had already drained the remainder of my internship savings on the holes themselves. So a common concern that people have when deciding whether to build a moonboard or just a regular woody is the ceiling height that is required to actually build it. Obviously, you could just build it outdoors, but then you have to worry about forking over extra cash for pressure-treated lumber so that your wall doesn't rot when it rains. I got incredibly lucky with my parents' garage, as the left section of the space has an elevated ceiling that has pretty much the perfect dimensions to fit a full-size moonboard, being more than 10 feet 4 inches high, almost exactly 8 feet wide, and plenty of space for falling away from the board. If you're not as lucky as me and don't have any ceilings high enough for a full-size moonboard, I'll leave links in the description below for guides on how to build a freestanding one outdoors. On the other hand, Ben Moon very recently released a miniature moonboard setup that can fit under pretty much any standard height ceiling, so if you're interested in that, also check the description box. Alright, so here I'm using a chalk line to mark up the grid for where the T-nut holes need to be drilled. There is no need for your plywood to already be attached for you to do this, and I actually had to take it off later and flip it because I drilled the kickboard grid upside down. Remember kids, measure once, cut twice. Here I am framing the wall itself. With this simple design, one piece of lumber acts as the top header for the wall, which is then screwed into the ceiling, while the top of the kickboard acted as the bottom header for the wall. I then propped the wall up using some of my spare 2x6s that I had lying around. Unfortunately, I did not get any footage of me propping the wall up, but all I can say for that is please be careful with what you use to prop your wall up. You really don't want your supports to suddenly slide out from underneath you and have the entire wall come crashing down on your head. If you're wondering why the wall is now facing the garage door and not the camera, it's because the top of the board would have come right up next to the portion of the garage that has a lower ceiling, as you can see here. I instead had to deal with the stairs that lead to the actual house, which I normally cover up with one of my crash pads. Pro tip, don't prop your wall up for ceiling attachment until you actually have prepped your ceiling for attaching things to it. In this case, since the ceiling joists ran parallel to the header of the wall, I needed to add sleepers, which are just pieces of lumber attached perpendicularly to at least 3 of the ceiling joists, so that I don't just attach the entire climbing wall to a single ceiling joist and collapse the entire damn house. You can see me struggling to slide my sleepers above the top of the wall into the positions that I needed. It would have been much easier to do this without the wall itself in my way. Here's something you should definitely never do. After I managed to get one sleeper attached, I proceeded to attach the wall itself to the sleeper and removed my support pole so that the right side of the wall would sag down and I could more easily slide my remaining sleepers into place. Please do not do this. Looking back, I realized the only thing preventing me from certain doom was 2 deck screws and nothing else. I did eventually get the sleepers into place and the wall completely attached, but once again did not get footage of it happening. Here I am drilling the T-nut grid for the main wall itself. The Moonboard is designed around the fact that plywood sheets are sold in 4-foot by 8-foot sections, reducing the amount of cutting that you need for the project. This also allows you to clamp all of your plywood together so that you don't have to drill as many holes individually when you're drilling your T-nut grid. Make sure to use plywood that is at least 23-30 seconds thick, otherwise you run the risk of ripping holes and T-nuts off of your wall. Also, unless you are seriously budget constrained, do not buy OSB and invest in some quality plywood. The sheets that I bought also have a ton and groove feature, allowing for them to slot into each other, which made the process of attaching the plywood to the wall a little easier. The process of drilling the holes, placing the T-nuts, and then screwing the T-nuts in from the back is by far the most time-consuming part of the project, so clamping the plywood together definitely helps to save some time. Speaking of T-nuts, I would recommend that you invest in some screw-in T-nuts rather than the hammer-in T-nuts, as hammer-ins can be prone to spinning and destroying the plywood around the area they're attached to. Screw-ins are slightly more expensive, but they're definitely worth the extra security and repairability that they offer. The holes I drilled for my T-nuts were purposely slightly smaller than their outer diameter, so that I would have to hammer or push them in addition to screws for a little extra friction and support. Finally, attaching the plywood to the wall. Use more screws than you think is necessary when you're doing this. Your support frame may be structurally sound, but if your plywood isn't properly attached, you could rip it off the frame while climbing. I managed to get the bottom sheet attached by myself, but had to enlist my dad's help for the second sheet. We tried getting the third sheet up with just the 2 of us, but fell just short as you can see here. In all honesty, I probably should have first attached all of the plywood sheets to the support frame before I propped it up, but I had built the frame before my T-nuts arrived and was anxious to finish building it as quickly as possible. We eventually got the last sheet up with the help of my mom and sister, and after that, all that was left was to set the holds and start climbing. If you've been following me on Instagram, you probably saw that I initially only received the black hold set, since they were the only ones in stock at the time I placed my order. The white and yellow holds arrived 4 weeks later. I just checked on the Moon Climbing website, and they've actually stopped taking further hold orders for the first time, I think, due to the unprecedented demand for them in this COVID-19 era. If you're watching this video during a time when the world is back to normal and are trying to decide which Moonboard hold set to purchase, my personal recommendation would be the 2016 set. It is by far the cheapest setup to buy and has the most benchmark problems since it's been around the longest. Yes, it's not beginner friendly, but the Moonboard is first and foremost a training tool. If it's easy, you're doing something wrong. I've heard good things about the new 2019 setup with all of the wood holds, but I've personally never climbed on it, so I can't give any recommendations there. And lastly, unless you're a beginner climber that is desperate for a standardized training board, stay away from the 2017 setup. A lot of the holds on that design are set kind of awkwardly, and the red blob holds are somehow way too juggy for a training board while simultaneously being the roughest on the skin. If you're interested in how much all this cost, I'll leave a rough breakdown of all the prices in the description box. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you have any questions about things I might have glossed over or missed. Stay tuned if you're interested in a short film on one of the only legal places to climb outside in the great state of Indiana, and drop a like if you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching again, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.